Good morning, Noblesville, Indiana. It's Mayor Chris Jensen here, along with my good friend, Kristen Boyce. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jensen. It's good to see you today.
It's wonderful to see you too. We were just Chris and I were just discussing that we need some walk-on music for this every couple of weeks. We're getting in the groove here after what probably 8 months of having these conversations. So we may get all hip and trendy in 2021. So just prepare yourself, everybody. So Kristen, it's a beautiful day in Noblesville. It was a gorgeous weekend in Noblesville. A very non-November weekend in Noblesville. So I was telling you my kids were outside a lot this weekend. You said it was good for the soul, and I think after last week, regardless of what your thoughts were on last week, we all could use some good fresh air for the soul. So I'm excited to have you here this morning. I'm glad to be back on Mental Health Monday. I know, Kristen, I'm sure you have too, had so many people say, hey, I'm looking forward to tuning in on Monday. I need a little check-in, regardless of what they're feeling. So I know we have some new viewers today. We want to say welcome to all of you. Your thoughts, your opinions, your beliefs are all welcome here, and we're doing this for you to have an outlet and a chance to process your feelings and breathe a little, which Kristen's going to get to in a minute. So a few ground rules. If you're here, I think see my friend Teresa already saying hi on the chat. So thanks, Teresa. Good morning. If you're here, let us know. Feel free to say hi. If you have any questions for Kristen or myself, feel free to leave those in the chat box. If we don't get to them this morning, we'll certainly follow up with you down the road. But we're going to cover a lot of topics this morning because there's a lot going on. But before we do that, as we do every other week, let's start with some square breathing exercise. And Kristen, I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here. The very first thing I teach, if you haven't been tuning in, is square breathing. And this is something I invite you to do every hour to help regulate your nervous system and calm. What it does is it calms the whole nervous system down so you feel more regulated and the ability to handle what comes your way. So we're going to start with our feet on the floor. This is the first step. Again, do this every hour. We're going to inhale through our nose for 4. We're going to hold the breath for 4. And we're going to slowly release out our mouth for 8, like you're cooling soup or cooling the cookie if you've got kids. So let's do it together. So inhale. Exhale slowly. You really want to get a good inhale in that breath so you get that full benefit on that exhale. So let's take one more together. Inhale through your nose. Release slowly out your mouth. This is the first step to really dealing and feeling our way through everything that's going on right now. So we're going to deal and feel our way through. So here we are.
Dealing and
Ready to
feeling.
go. We're dealing
I
and
like it.
feeling.
Feeling and feeling. So, all right. Well, let's kick off. Last week was a crazy time in our country, a time of that I think a lot of people had anxiety about. There was a lot of emotions, many cups runneth over, if you will, last week and last weekend. Certainly respect all those. And so our country is really going to be faced with a big transition. So let's start with that topic, transitions. And we don't have to view it in terms of the presidential election. You can view it as your own life. You know, we're transitioning from fall to winter, which is obviously a very sometimes difficult time for some people. People may be transitioning in their jobs. Transitions are very difficult. And they're certainly difficult in adults. I know they're very difficult in kids. And I think there's a lot of anticipation of other transitions that may be coming up at some point in time too. So, Kristen, let's start there and how we handle transitions in our life and transitions with maybe relationships as well. So can you touch on transitions for us?
Yeah, and let's acknowledge that we all go through transitions and they aren't always easy. Like you said, Mayor Jensen, the first thing I want to acknowledge is we typically have grief when there's transitions. We might be grieving how things used to be. For example, right now we're transitioning to the fall, and we might be transitioning to, oh, we were outside. Now this weekend was an exception. We're still outside. We were out and about. outdoors and things change. When the seasons change, sometimes that impacts our mood. It impacts how we feel. And so we have to acknowledge sometimes there's loss. We've been in a huge transitional time in our country with not only the pandemic, but with politics, among other things. And it's had a huge impact on how people are feeling right now. There's been a lot of loss. And we're looking at the holidays right now. Well, November, we're transitioning to Thanksgiving, and that's going to look different for folks. And there's a lot of loss there. So when we think of, I won't be able to do the typical holiday where we're all together, we're trying to figure out, how are we going to do that via Zoom? How are we going to do that outside possibly? And when we might not be able to see our loved ones, and there is grief in that. So we have to acknowledge what we're emotionally going through with those core emotions. And we're going to revisit those because it's important, it's essential to our emotional well-being. So I just taught a class, so to speak. I had a speaking engagement, and the first thing we talked about was core emotions. And we've talked about them pretty much every week on this series, because if we're not dealing with those, we're not moving through them. So they are anger, which can also be secondary. And a lot of people have had a lot of anger. And really underneath that has been a tremendous amount of fear. We have to acknowledge that people have been very afraid of getting sick, afraid of different outcomes, afraid of what's going to happen. And we have to acknowledge that, to tend to that, to nurture that. The next one is sadness. I'm seeing a ton of sadness. You can also label that as grief, however you want to label it, but sadness is important, that you're acknowledging it, that you're noticing it. There's been a lot of disgust. Let's be frank, there's been a lot of disgust. This is one we don't really talk about much. It gets labeled into anger, but really disgust is important to acknowledge when we are going through any kind of transition. All of these are important. Then we have excitement, we have sexual excitement, and then we have joy. And anytime we are going through a transition, we want to feel happy, quote unquote. People want to chase happiness. I'm like, happiness comes and goes. What people really want is contentment. They want inner peace. They want calm. They want clarity. And when we're in a transition, that sometimes is all muddled up. We don't have clarity. We don't feel real calm. So we have to start with the breathing as step one. Step two is we have to acknowledge what we're feeling. Step three, we have to have a lot of self-compassion, because we have to nurture ourselves through it. We have to self-soothe. We have to hold grace for ourselves. Number four is doing some sort of movement. If we're feeling frozen, if we're feeling stuck, we need to mobilize it. So that looks like we might do a walk, what you're physically able to do. That might be a walk. That might be yoga. That might be riding your bike. That might be going up and down stairs. And if you can't do stairs, that's fine. Maybe it might be walking around your house. We have to mobilize and move that energy, because when we're in transition, oftentimes we go to collapse, we go to shut down, we go to freeze, we go to overwhelm, we go to stress, and we don't know how to move through that. So those are my key pieces. The last thing I really encourage people to do is you've got to be doing some sort of writing, like write it out to get it out. And everyone's like, I don't want to write. I don't have the energy. It's ridiculous. I'm like, you got to be getting it out. You got to get out what's on the inside, because otherwise you're going to put it on other people. You're going to get very reactive. And right now, a lot of people, we're in some sort of trauma, right? Because we're isolated. We're not able to do what we normally do. And that really goes back to a lot of maybe history in your own life. And when we can get it out, we can move through it and get to the other side. And that looks like a repeated process. And listening to things that inspire you, whether it's music, podcasts, reading a book that inspires you. And then the last thing is building a support system. And whether that looks like going, a church group, a 12-step program, really cultivating relationships, because people feel really lonely during transitions. People feel really lonely right now. And if we can come up with a circle of love for ourselves. And that looks like maybe it could be your faith. It could be one or two people that are in your circle of love that help you feel connected, that you're going to do vulnerability with. That's really important. And that, again, that might be a therapist. That might be a pastor. That might be, someone, a mentor in your life. That might be a friend, a teacher, a coworker. The list can go on and on. We have to cultivate those relationships. People kind of say, well, I'm always the one that reaches out. I'm like, I get it. And if you want to have connection, we have to be the ones. People can't read our minds. We have to be the ones reaching out. Write somebody a note, pick up the phone, reach out. It's important we have a support network right now.
So that was, you mentioned something that was really important, and somebody just mentioned in the comments. I think it's so important going into the holiday season. Again, I think back to my time as a kid and how joyous Thanksgiving and Christmas was, and how wonderful time. As an adult, though, I have a whole separate set of emotions and thoughts about the holidays. I certainly love seeing my kids excited, but it comes with a lot of stressors. It certainly comes with a lot of anxiety and built up thoughts this year, especially. And Teresa asked a question, or Nisa made a comment that her family relies on her to be the one that drives the holiday spirit or helps be. I know there's my mom, for example, who I'm sure is watching, is the unifier in our family, right? She's the grandma. So, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are just nervous about what does that look like? And maybe they're not feeling in the holiday spirit. And they know it's going to be different this year. And we're going to, in a separate day, we're going to talk about how it has to be a little different this year, because we're seeing a lot of these COVID cases come, unfortunately, from those social gatherings. So we know it's going to be a little different. Can you talk a little bit about how we can work through some of the emotions around not just holidays in general? I mean, normal holidays are stressful, but then add on COVID and it's a whole nother layer.
It's a whole nother layer. And we're going to talk about this as a theme for the next bit this month and next month, because it's something that we're all going to deal with. Every single person that's listening is going to deal with this. And so I want to acknowledge that, what happens is we feel guilty. We feel bad if we can't do what we normally do. We feel responsible. And this is where guilt can take us away from processing our emotions and setting a healthy boundary. So, because we feel bad. So we'll just be like, oh, we kind of tiptoe around it. And when I can go take a deep breath, it's okay. It's okay to say, this is what I can handle this year, and this is what I can't handle. And I give people verbiage. So it's like, I really love our holidays together. And I really want to get together. And right now with the pandemic, I don't think I can handle the anxiety and the fear of maybe what could happen. And I don't want you to have to live with, let's say you're worried about giving it to me. And so can we brainstorm maybe some ways that we could do it differently this year? And I'm giving you some language. What happens is people kind of shut down because they feel bad, and then they don't know how to handle it. So they just don't. And then they're overwhelmed with anxiety. They're overwhelmed with the anxiety of, I can't handle this. This feels like too much. I'm too afraid. We have to change the narrative now to be able to speak your truth with love and grace, so we can have these conversations. What we normally do of sweeping things under the rug and we pretend and we placate and we just go along with isn't going to work, because it's going to create more anxiety. It's going to create more fear, and it's going to create more shutdown and stuckness. We're learning to have hard conversations with empathy and compassion. And I'm teaching this because we never learned this. We didn't learn to say how we felt. We were trying to survive. We wanted to maintain connection, and we thought this is what we do. It's not going to work anymore with the paradigm we're under now. It's no longer going to serve you and the other people you're in relationship with, because we can't get to problem solving. We can't get to, how could this look different? And then we can grieve it, and then we can accept that what we have to do right now. I love the words right now, because this can change. Right now or this year are great words to add on, so it doesn't feel so permanent. So we can say, right now, this is what I can handle. Right now, this is what I can't handle. And that gives you some grace to say that can change. And then we can't take on how other people are going to react. This is what shuts people down. They're like, well, they're going to get mad. I was like, well, that's there. They have to self-soothe through that. You can't do it for them. Trust me, I would sprinkle that out everywhere if I could help everybody feel better and take on, all their emotions. No, I don't want to do that. I want them to feel better. And we all have to self-soothe. This is what I'm trying. We all have to self-regulate. I can't put it on someone else to make me feel better. That's not fair to them. That will impact the weight of that relationship. And so when I can say, I love you, and break up with the word but right now, break up. I love you, but ew, that just feels like manipulation. That feels like I got slimed on. I love you, and I love and in a both. I love you, and this is what I feel safe with. This is what I feel comfortable with this year. This is what I don't feel comfortable with. I realize that might be some grief for you, and let's talk about that.
Well, I think I'm just going to add on, I think any parent or grandparent who feels guilty maybe about, letting some folks down, I don't think there's anyone in this world right now that expects the holidays this year to be exactly like the holidays last year. So give yourself that grace to know that if you were to make those statements that I love you, and this is what I feel comfortable doing, or I love you, and can you tell me what you feel comfortable doing? That other person is going to have an opinion. They're going to have some thoughts. Everyone has some thoughts on what makes them feel comfortable. So it goes back to those tricky conversations that we've been talking about. How do we have those difficult conversations? And I think if you take the first step and open it up, you'll quickly feel comforted knowing that everyone's thinking that this is going to have to look a little different this year. So I just think that was a really good analogy there as we go into Thanksgiving and Christmas. I know so many parents, I'm a parent, you're a parent, want to fix things. We want to make it better. We want to make it right. We want to fix it. We can't fix this. We cannot. And so let's look at a new way to be adaptable right now this year and go from there. So I love that a lot. That was very, very helpful. So thank you, Kristen. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, piggyback off what you're saying, because what happens is when we do take that on and we do try to fix it, it doesn't go well.
No.
Because then if they don't respond a certain way, like, oh, okay, then we feel ashamed, like we're not doing a good enough job. We feel guilty, and it's a vicious cycle. So fixing it, there is no fixing another person. There is no fixing another person. You can only work on you and your responses and your triggers. We cannot fix another person. Trust me, I'd be sprinkling that out for everybody to feel better. Mm-hmm. We have to rumble through all of our emotions in order to move through them and get to the other side. So I just want to piggyback off what you're saying. I think it's really important.
And I think if you have those feelings, if you're a parent or grandparent that has the feelings of guilt or anxiety going into the holidays, I would encourage you to reach out to those people that you normally spend time with during the holidays and make your feelings known or ask their opinion. Get that dialogue started. I feel like that you'll be less lonely in that process when you realize that others are thinking very similar things. So start that conversation.
Yeah, and I like how Kathy said giving grace. Mm-hmm. To yourself and to other people, it goes so far. And we can have boundaries and give grace. Mm-hmm. I'm all about the end. So I can say, I love you, and that I'm feeling so overwhelmed this year and the fear. So I don't think I can handle, I'm afraid to be with a crowd. I love you, because you might really want to be with them. Now, some people might not want to be with their family, so they're loving this excuse. Mm-hmm. So, right? So we have kind of both sides here. And for those that really do want to be with their family, when we can all acknowledge that we all feel sad, that it has to be different, that is so helpful to come together and work through that grief. And some people aren't going to feel the same way, and that's okay too. That's where you kind of self-comfort and offer yourself that grace.
Yeah. Let's talk. You talked a little bit about it a little earlier too. Let's talk about loneliness for a minute. I was actually with my son had a basketball game yesterday, and there was some grandparents there that were very fearful about what the future looks like, and whether we'll have to go back to different stages because of heightened COVID numbers, and they were worried, because they were either widowed or just single people who were concerned about being by themselves and being lonely. So let's talk a little bit about loneliness, because again, the holidays really probably exacerbate that. That loneliness feeling. So let's talk about how we work through loneliness in ourselves. And then maybe, Kristen, could you touch on if we self-identify maybe others that we know are lonely, that maybe aren't willing to acknowledge that, or how do we approach some of our friends or neighbors that might be lonely and assist them?
Yeah, so this is really important right now. We are in a mental health crisis, and I'm going to say it. I have not seen anything like it in my career. Been doing this 17, 18 years. And loneliness, isolation is extremely hard. Okay. So yeah, we want to first acknowledge if you're lonely. Loneliness is a natural feeling. We're all going to feel lonely a time or two. It's to the degree we feel lonely and isolated. Is there something underneath that needs to be tended to that hasn't gotten resolved before the pandemic? That needs to be tended to. That's why I'm encouraging as many people to get into therapy as possible, if you can, or be in a support program. There's a lot online right now. The second thing is reaching out and saying to somebody, I feel really lonely. I feel really sad. I realize that's vulnerable. That's why we need our one or two people that we can be honest with and we can say how we're really feeling. And then it's doing things that really help nurture yourself. So is it taking a class online? Is it volunteering, even if it's online to help with something? Is it, being in your garden? Now I realize the weather's changing. Is it going for a walk? What is it that speaks to your soul? What is it that when you're doing that thing, you feel like, okay, I feel I can take a breath now. And it might be you crochet, and maybe it's you're doing a woodworking project. Maybe you're volunteering at a soup kitchen. Maybe whatever that looks like for you, we have to identify a self-care list. And what that looks like is, what does that look like to feed your soul? Is it reading? Is it, being a mentor? Is it I don't know what that looks like for you, but it's coming up with what are those things that bring you joy? What are those things that you get excited about? And when we're depressed, it's very hard to come up with that list. That's why I want people to do that and take time, even if it's one or two things on that list. When you feel lonely, you're going to pull the list out. The other thing is, I like to come up with the circle of love, where you come up with, and a client actually came up with that term, and I loved it, called the circle of love. And what is it that who's in that circle? Who's in that circle that you can be real with? Who's in that circle that you can be vulnerable with? And right now, that really helps when we create some sort of connection, whether it's, with religious connection with God. If that doesn't resonate for you, it could be, with a friend or somebody else. Set time to connect with those people. Like, hey, let's get on a Zoom or FaceTime at, 4:00 on Friday. And you have something every week in your schedule that you can take that time and have that connection time, and it gives you something to look forward to.
Can you talk a little bit about who best with that? So go back to that circle of love, because I like that comment. I think harken back to April, and we kind of had, when everyone was kind of quarantined and shut down, and the hunker down Hoosier moment, and we kind of did a Zoom with some of our neighbors, similar neighbors who have kids about our age, and it was helpful for us to be in a similar setting, right? Because they're dealing with kids and how that works. Do you advise that to kind of find a circle that has people that are similar? So if you are a grandmother, maybe a widowed grandmother, finding others that might be single as well to check in with. Do you have any advice on kind of guidance on not like I said, creating your own circle of love, but maybe interacting with those that have maybe similar strengths or challenges that you might be faced with.
Yeah, anytime we have somebody that's going through similar life journey or similar transitions can be super helpful. For example, like a grief share group, if you're walking through grief, or let's say you're going through a divorce recovery group, or Al-Anon, or the 12 AA, or Codependence Anonymous, or Overeaters Anonymous. Some of these that are you're not alone. There's other people going through the same thing. And now there's a lot being offered online. So if you are going through, you're a widowed grandmother, get on online and type in widow grandmother support group. There's so many options right now, and people are really afraid to do groups. Let's just be real. They're like, I don't want to do a group. And if you don't want to do a group, that's okay. And I invite you to take a deep breath and try it out for a couple of weeks and see how you feel, because one time you go is going to be uncomfortable. This is what I'm noticing. We don't know how to do discomfort. We want to lean towards comfort. So putting ourselves out there can feel scary, right? It feels vulnerable. And we take a deep breath and we go, okay, if I want deeper connections, then I have to show up with my authentic self. If I'm not showing up and putting myself out there, nobody knows what's really going on. So support groups are really great, or finding communities. So a MOPS group for first-time moms, things like that are really helpful. And then small groups at church and things along those lines can be, or things of similar interest. I cannot emphasize that enough. So if you are really interested in rescuing animals, or you're interested in rescuing a certain kind of dog or cats or whatever that looks like for you, getting involved in those organizations can be really powerful in your life, because you feel like you have purpose and meaning and you're giving back. So if you've had, a domestic violence, like getting involved with Prevail and helping in that way, there's ways to take the pain of the past and make purpose and meaning out of it. So that is being of service. And that helps us when we feel alone. That helps us create deeper, more meaningful connections. And I really encourage you to breathe through that discomfort and try it out. So those are some options when we're looking at creating kind of a community or a circle of love.
Yeah, and I love this topic today, and I want to reiterate as we kind of wrap up here that this is going to be a theme for us going into the holidays. We know the holidays themselves are stressful. They're lonely. They're anxiety ridden. It's dark outside. Daylight savings time last week, you could have thought it was 11 p.m. and it was 5:45. I understand that. So tune in, join us on this journey during this time. We're going to be very thematic around how to process these emotions through the holidays. One thing that, I've made it my mission to try to be more open about things that I've dealt with, personal examples. On Saturday morning, I was frustrated about something at home, and I found great therapy in using my new electric hedge trimmers and clearing out all the brush, all the lilies out of our flower garden. And something simple like that, because they were all dead and ugly and they needed to be done. But getting a project checked off my list and having that cleaned out was such good therapy for me, such a good moment of I needed that movement, that something as simple as that. So I know sometimes I have things weighing on my to-do list that drive me crazy, and being able to check one of those things off, even if it's just dead lilies, really helped me get kind of reset for the day. So I just want
to share. It's a metaphor. You're cleaning out. I cleaned out our garage, and what I'm hearing a lot of is I don't have motivation. I have zero. I did not have motivation to clean out my garage. Let me tell you, I was like, there was something though, cleaning out and simplifying and getting rid of things, even though I didn't want to do it, didn't have the energy. It's one of those similar to you when you're cleaning out the brush, you're really taking that time. So I had to breathe through it and take one little section at a time and give myself a lot of breaks. So this is what I'm also encouraging people to do is take breaths. You're not going to have the motivation always. I'm just going to shoot you straight, right? You're not going to be like, oh, let me go and clean out my garage.
Will never be fun.
No, I didn't want to clean out the garage.
No.
It's a metaphor, though. That's the invitation that's in front of us now. is what doesn't serve you anymore. We can no longer do it. What the pandemic is forcing us, we can no longer do what we've always done. So if you've been the caregiver and you're burned out, you're not going to be able to do it. And so we have to rumble through that. We have to feel our way through that. So the pandemic has opened up spaces in us that we never knew were there.
Yeah.
And compassion and grace. And I know we're out of time. Went super fast.
Yeah. Well, yes, exactly. With that, though, if somebody's struggling right now in this moment, where can they turn, Kristen?
So we have lots of resources. So do not be alone in this. There is help out there. So first things first, 741, you can text 741-741-CONNECT. If you are suicidal, if you're struggling with suicidal thoughts, please call 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-TALK. We have Prevail here locally for any domestic violence whatsoever. Please call them 317-776-3472. Obviously, we have Community North, St. Vincent Stress Center. And if there's any type of drug addiction, we have Fairbanks. And then overdose hotline is 211. That's 211 if there's the overdose hotline. And there's universities out there offering free therapy right now. If you're struggling, call a local therapist. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. We don't want you walking through this alone. It's really important you know that there are resources out there for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Kristen Boyce, owner of Pathways to Healing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks on the 23rd, the week of Thanksgiving. I believe that's that week. Please come join us. Invite a friend. If you know somebody who's struggling with anything or just, wants to tune in and hear some great topical advice, have them join us in 2 weeks for Mental Health Monday. We've been averaging several thousand viewers a week, which is just humbling and amazing at the same time. But we know there's more people out there that can benefit from this conversation. So come back and join us. Kristen, as always, you're the best. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody.